sent from other planets, and that the light of the sun and stars has given us birth. But you're the fighter of creation, the breath of the eternal, the rhythms in our hearts and the words upon our tongue. Your music fills our songs and sets our feet to dancing, and gives us joy-filled wisdom that it's from you we have come. From you we all have come. Some say we all came from a cradle of civilization, and others from the most beautiful garden on earth. Some say a bird from heaven delivers our children to the mothers and fathers who long to give them birth. But you're the fire of creation, the breath of the eternal, the rhythm in our hearts and the words upon our tongue. Your music fills our songs and sets our feet to dancing, and gives us joy-filled wisdom that is from you we have come. From you we all have come. This precious gift of life is a wondrous treasure. There's no way to express our thankfulness. The beauty of your grace we cannot measure, nor the greatest gift of life, your precious love. For you're the power of creation, the breath of the eternal, the rhythm in our hearts and the words upon our tongue. Your music fills our songs and sets our feet to dancing, and gives us joy-filled wisdom that it's from you we have come. From you we all have come. In you we all are one. We all are one. We all are one.
Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya Avir Avir Ma'elhi Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Te Namam Pahinityam and through, and protect us evermore with your loving presence. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Good morning. Nice to see you all. So today's topic is trusting God. And I picked this one today, this subject, because it seems to be one that I am particularly bad at. And sometimes I pick things that I am particularly bad at in the hopes that by bringing them to the podium, I will elevate my own station. And I would say that, so that's one of my motives, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to cover some ground that is familiar territory for a lot, if not all of you. And so I think the first question I would ask about this issue of trusting God is, why? Why do we want to trust God? What does this do for us in our lives? It's a religious practice, and practicing religion should have an immediate benefit in our lives, something that makes our lives better here and now. And so I think a great motivation to take up this practice was given by Swami Arupeshananda, a great monk of our order and a disciple of Vivekananda. He puts it very succinctly. He says, "Worry or anxiety is not caused by misfortune. It comes from lack of trust in God." Now think about that for a second. It's a very strong statement. Worry or anxiety is not caused by misfortune. It is caused by a lack of trust in God. We might be able to see that intellectually if you have trust in an all-powerful, an all-knowing being, and you trust that this being is on your side and has your back. Well, then there logically would not be any room for worry or anxiety. But the fact is, in our lives, that's not how we operate, right? Misfortune we treat as at least the proximate cause of our worry and anxiety. We may intellectually acknowledge that the real cause, as Swami Arupeshananda says, is that we don't trust God enough, but the proximate cause and our operational behavior indicates that we really think is that the present misfortune is actually the cause of my anxiety and worry. And the fact is, we actually don't need misfortune to have anxiety and worry. That's unnecessary. We can have perfect success and still be miserably anxious and worried, right? So many examples are there. I will pick work. Say we want something at work. We want a promotion. We want a raise. We want some recognition from our superiors, whatever it is. Well, what do? I mean, assuming that we are honest and straightforward, we will work for it. We'll try and do a really good job on the next presentation, contract, peer review, whatever it is. And then what happens? Well, if everything goes right, so in other words, maybe an unscrupulous boss doesn't take credit for our work, an incompetent boss does not ignore the importance of our work because he doesn't understand it, whatever other office politics or disasters of the home don't occur that allow everything to go smoothly, then our objective succeeds, right? But all those failure modes, innumerable really, can cause us worry and anxiety, can keep us up at night. It can be so bad that by the time we've actually succeeded, we don't even care anymore. We're more worried about our health. We're more worried about our mental health. We've spent so many nights up worrying, and then we worry that we're spending too many nights up worrying, right? We're worrying that we're not getting enough sleep, and then we start to think we're going bats, right?
Don't worry, be happy.
So that's worry in success. Now, what happens if we actually trust God? Then what? Well, you still do the work. We still have to do the work, right? But now, every time these little anxiety thoughts come in, you say, okay, God, I'm trusting this one to you. I'm giving this one to you. I've done my duty, and now I'm leaving the rest of this up to you. And of course, trusting in God doesn't mean that we're going to get the promotion or we're going to get the presentation right, it's all going to go fine, right? It doesn't mean that, right? That's the big rub, right? Well, I trust it up to God, but I'm just not sure God wants this as much as I do, right? And so that makes it very difficult for us to trust in God, and we think, or we have to think at these times, if we have any hope of trusting in God, maybe what I want isn't actually what I need, right? We have to be able to admit that. That sounds so simple, and yet in some situations it is very difficult to admit this possibility. Maybe I should be more concerned about the goals I've chosen than the goals I've achieved. All right, that's another one we don't naturally think about. If we can't entertain these possibilities, maybe God knows better than I do what I should get in my life. If we can't entertain those, then trusting in God is very unlikely, impossible really. There's a story about this in the Gospel. Sri Ramakrishna has a disciple, Adhar. Adhar is a successful man of the world. He has a government post that has prestige and purse and power, influence. And he wants a better job. He wants a higher position, more power, more purse, all that. So he's been going to Sri Ramakrishna for a while. He realizes that Sri Ramakrishna seems to be able to talk to God and make anything happen that he wants to. And so he says, well, I'll ask Sri Ramakrishna to get me this job, right? And he asks some of the other master's other disciples to get him this job. And Sri Ramakrishna kind of half-heartedly goes along with it, but it's clear that he's not too keen on this request. And Adhar doesn't get the job, he doesn't get the promotion, and Sri Ramakrishna basically says, be satisfied with the position that you have, right? You are already a big shot. You don't need any more money. You don't need to be a bigger shot. That is not going to help you, right? And that begs the question, what about my promotion? What about my desire, my objective? Have I picked an objective that is going to help my spiritual growth? Generally, this question, categorically, I don't think it can be answered. Sometimes a promotion is good for us spiritually, and sometimes it isn't. And generally, the ability to distinguish these two cases is beyond us. We generally can't see that what we want isn't really what we need most of the time. Kind of bad news. It seems like a lot of the time in spiritual life, in fact, what you want isn't what you need. But there are times that it is. For example, a certain amount of self-confidence, a sense of self-worth, is required for spiritual life, for anything really. We have to have a certain sense that we are capable people, that we have merit. A lot of us tie this sense of self-image to our performance in our careers. That's natural. People do that. And so it may actually be in our spiritual best interest to advance in our career. It's possible. On the other hand, if we're brimming with self-confidence, and this is just another notch in our belt, it's quite possible this will just lead to vanity and entanglement. Right? And we generally can't really figure this out on our own. But Sri Ramakrishna's teaching indicates that if we have any hope of doing this, any hope of stepping back from our desire and giving it to God, what we have to do is make God the ultimate objective. There's nothing inherently wrong in wanting a promotion, wanting a new house, a new car, a new romantic interest, whatever it is. Nothing inherently wrong there. But we have to make God the ultimate objective. All these other objectives, all these material objectives are subordinated. We must subordinate those objectives to the God objective, right? If I will try and please this person, if that pleases God. I will try and advance in my career if that advances my spiritual life, right? This is what Sri Ramakrishna's teaching suggests, that if we have any hope of trusting in God, we have got to be able to subordinate the material objective to the God objective. The God objective may be far off, but it's still the primary objective, right? This will allow us to have a little bit of detachment so we might be able to admit that the current objective wasn't in my best interest and it's actually okay that I trusted this with God and it didn't happen, right? Okay, now that probably sounds fairly challenging. I think it is. But it's not hard to imagine situations far more challenging than this. If you think about the war in Ukraine, right? The earthquake in Turkey, how could we possibly expect these people to trust in God so much that they could actually live without worry? Is that realistic to think that anyone could do that? I mean, intellectually you could sort of see it, you could conceive of this, but is it possible? There are records of saints that have lived in these situations utterly worry-free. What about us? And then there's our personal history, right? You say, I can't trust God because he's let me down too many times already. God has betrayed me too many times already. He's proven himself untrustworthy already, right? I think we all have something where we could at least choose that viewpoint. And so, I get it. I have my own. I'll make it personal. My mom is sitting there in the back. She's a quadriplegic. She was walking when I joined the monastery. And about 4 years after that, a surgeon with an unsteady hand sliced a nerve in her neck, and she has been in this condition for the last 17 years. And I won't bore you with the medical details, but the fact is that it wasn't just the slice in the neck. There was a slice in the neck, and there was a series of extremely unfortunate and extremely unlikely events that occurred in succession after that to put her in this condition. My father and I went through this. She was unconscious, of course. Went through the whole experience, went through the surgical notes, all that. That was our impression, right or wrong. It seemed to us very much that this was a deliberate act of the divine. It seemed to us that God had intentionally put my mother in a wheelchair. That's what we thought at the time, right? Now, I don't like that. I don't agree with that. I don't understand that. Of course, I want my mom to walk, right? Does that mean that God has betrayed me? No. Does it mean that God is not worthy of my trust? No, it does not. We have to be able to let the emotions subside enough so that we can be objective about some of the events in our lives, right? It means that I just don't understand this yet, right? And so when life hits us with these really big things, whatever they are, we've all had ours. Nobody seems to escape this entirely here. How do we hope to progress on this path of trusting God? How can we hope to do that? Well, we have to take baby steps. That's what we have to do. We have to move forward in little increments. It's worry and anxiety. It's not a light switch that you can turn on and off. It's more like a dimmer, rheostat, right? So you take some small thing that you think you can trust to God, right? You take something little and you try, okay, God, the worry comes into your mind and you say, okay, I'm going to give this one to God. I'm going to let God take care of this, however it turns out, right? And we continue with this practice. And that, of course, the challenges get bigger and bigger because that's how things go. But it works. This works. When the worry comes into the mind and you say, okay, God, I'm going to surrender this one to you, there is an immediate effect, an immediate response in your mind. Your mind immediately senses some little bit of peace. You may have to repeat those words 100 times in an hour. Lord, I'm giving this one to you. I'm trusting you with this one, right? But it works. I know that it works. I've seen it work in my own life. I've seen it work in the lives of others. And you think, okay, that's kind of weird, right? Because you came here today and you said that you were going to give this talk because you stunk at this. And now you're telling me that this works, and you know that it works. So what's going on, right? I mean, if you know that this works, why do you think you're so bad at it, and why are you bringing it here? Yeah, it's a good question. But that's how it is. What happens is the mind forgets the lesson of experience, right? So I can know that this works up to the present moment, and I can doubt the next step forward. Knowing and doubting, right? You know and yet you doubt. And if you know and yet you doubt, that means the problem is actually no longer trusting God. If you know and you doubt, what that means is the problem is now controlling the mind. That's the problem, right? And controlling the mind means every time the worry, the anxiety comes up, we recall the lesson of experience. Right? We recall what it's done for us in our own lives. All of us have this. All of us have a bank that we don't perhaps withdraw from sufficiently of God's mercies and graces in our lives. We don't think about those enough. But that's what this is. This is an opportunity. I mean, it's more of a compulsion, right? If you're going to escape from worry and anxiety, you have got to recall the lesson of experience, right? And you can do this several times, and then something will come up. Some anxiety fantasy will come up in your mind, and you'll go with it, right? You'll forget. And you'll go down the river of anxiety thoughts, and you'll think, well, if he does this, then I'll do that. And if she says this, then I'll say that. And if this happens, if this job doesn't work, I'll go get another one. If this person doesn't like me, I'll go find somebody else. Whatever it is, right? Calculation, self-interest, right? Calculating how to maintain our privilege and our position. Right? We fall back into this again and again. And then you think, you catch yourself, right? After a few seconds or minutes or hours of this, you go, oh, what have I done? Lord, I was going to try and trust you with this one, and I've gone down the river of worry, right? Will I ever be able to beat this? Will I ever actually be able to trust you, God? And so we can know, and yet we can doubt at the same time. We can know that this works, doubt the end result, doubt the next step forward. Right? Knowing and doubting. F. Scott Fitzgerald said that this is the test of a first-rate intelligence, interestingly enough. he said, the sign of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. That's what he said. One should, for example, be able to see that things are hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. And so that challenge, holding two opposing ideas in the mind and continuing to function, rises again and again in religion. So many examples. Free will with an omniscient God. We thought about that one. God knows past, present, and future, and yet I think I have free will. Well, how's that going to work? If God knows past, present, and future, he knows every decision I'm going to make before I make it. And the decision that I made. Every decision I'll face, every decision I'll make. From the beginning of the Big Bang, he's known till right now that was going to happen. Right? That's an omniscient God. And so, clearly, these are contradictory ideas, and yet we just march forward with them. Justice and mercy. We say God is infinitely just, and God is infinitely merciful. Have we thought about that one? Someone commits a crime. Either they get punished or they don't. Right? Justice demands one, mercy demands the other. You say, well, you could compromise between these two. Well, that's not infinite. Right? That's not infinitely just and infinitely merciful. That's a compromise. It's some amount of this and some amount of that. Right? Even the image of the Divine Mother. Right? The image of the Divine Mother. With the right hands, she's giving us boons and offering us protection. With the left hands, she's chopping off our heads. Right? These contradictory ideas are everywhere in religion. We cannot let them paralyze us. We have to continue to march forward. Right? We have to continue to function, as Fitzgerald says. The best example that I've seen of this is Swami Vivekananda. And in fact, I really think that Swami Vivekananda is just the ultimate spiritual seeker. I mean, his life is this roadmap of how to be a good disciple. And he has this problem of knowing and doubting, and a bunch of other, he's the ultimate paradox manager. If you look at his life, you'll find so many paradoxes that he could manage. But this particular problem of knowing and doubting, he definitely suffered through. And I think it's very instructive. When he was just 18, he had his first trip to Dakshineswar to meet Sri Ramakrishna. And he comes with some friends. Sri Ramakrishna asks him to sing some songs. He does. And the master takes him outside after he hears him sing and starts to tremble and weep and babble and say, why have you made me wait so long? I've been waiting for you, and you've been so long in coming. That wasn't kind of you. And Vivekananda, 18, he just got here, right? He describes it like this. He says, the master went on like that, raving and weeping. Then suddenly he folded his palms together and began addressing me as if I was some sort of divine being. He said, I know who you are, my Lord. Right? He calls this 18-year-old kid my Lord, right? I know who you are, my Lord. You are Nara, the ancient sage, the incarnation of Narayana. You have come back to earth to take away the sufferings and sorrows of mankind. Imagine being 18 and meeting someone who's 46 in a temple, and they tell you this. What would you think? He thinks he's nuts. He thinks Sri Ramakrishna is nuts. Very reasonable conclusion, right? And so they go back into after this scene is over, and Vivekananda's, kind of baffled by it, they go back into the room, and Sri Ramakrishna proceeds to act completely normally, to speak words of great wisdom, great inspiration. And Swamiji thinks, well, wait, what was the guy out there, and there's the guy in here? This is real. These words and this wisdom is real. It seems real to me. And so he doesn't know what to make of it. Sri Ramakrishna forces him, begs him to promise to return. Vivekananda has to promise him to return before he leaves the room. He's just, pleading with him. Okay, he says, he'll come back. But the paradoxes are bothering him, and he waits for a month. Finally, he shows up again. He finds Sri Ramakrishna sitting alone in the room on a bed, silently meditating. The master sees him and calls him to sit. And as he sits, Sri Ramakrishna looks at him and gets up and starts moving towards him. And I'll read Vivekananda's description of this one again. He says, he muttered something to himself, which I couldn't understand. He looked at me very hard. Then he rose and approached me. I thought we were about to have another crazy scene. Scarcely had that thought passed through my mind before he placed his right foot on my body. Immediately, I had a wonderful experience. My eyes were wide open, and I saw that everything in the room, including the walls themselves, was whirling rapidly around and receding. And at the same time, it seemed to me that my consciousness of self, together with the entire universe, was about to vanish into a vast, all-devouring void. He panics. Vivekananda panics. Sri Ramakrishna laughs. And he touches him again, and the whole thing ends. Okay? So at this point, not only has this man given words of wisdom and inspiration, but now he's demonstrated major spiritual power. Clearly, he controlled this whole thing. He touched him once, everything disappeared. He touched him again, it's all over. Right? Now Vivekananda is more perplexed. He holds on to the idea that Sri Ramakrishna is nuts. He holds on to that idea. And yet, he cannot deny his own experience. This happened. I felt it. This was real, right? And he says, I pondered over this, but I could conclude nothing. There it remained in my heart, an unsolved problem of great import. Third visit. That was the second visit, right? Third visit. This time, he only waits 4 days. He's got to figure out what's going on here, right? This is too much. So in 4 days, he goes back. He's determined to prevent any crazy scene. He's determined not to let him take the world away or whatever he did, right? No magic spells on me. He's determined to fight these things. None of it works. Sri Ramakrishna touches him, and again, he's gone. The whole thing disappears, and after it's over, he's back, and something happened. Now, at this point, he simply cannot deny the reality of this man's spiritual power. He can't. He still, even though he's starting to believe in these visions and believe in this stuff, this is the amazing thing we find in his life. At this point, he's convinced Sri Ramakrishna is real, and yet, every time the next vision, the next teaching comes, he doubts it. All the previous experiences that he had, they all work. They're all perfect. Everything that Sri Ramakrishna has said has turned out to be true. Every experience that he's given him, he cannot deny. And yet every teaching he gives, we see again and again. I doubt it. Sri Ramakrishna will say, the Divine Mother said this or that. Vivekananda says, you're hallucinating. How do you know you're not hallucinating? After all this, right? And so many other things. Sri Ramakrishna will say this or that, and Vivekananda will go test it and investigate. Right? He knows, and yet he doubts. He knows, and yet he doubts. And that is, in my opinion, what we have to do. We cannot force ourselves to believe something that we don't believe. It's not reasonable. We cannot force ourselves to trust a God that we don't trust, right? Or to say that we trust a God that we don't trust. It doesn't do us any good. We have to be honest with ourselves, right? And that's what he was. And what does he do with these contradictory ideas? He continues to march. He goes forward. He continues to function, as Fitzgerald said, right? He has these incredibly opposing ideas, knowing and doubting, and yet he marches forward. And what happens? Their relationship blossoms. It becomes beautiful. He spends more and more time with the master at Dakshineswar. They have beautiful singing and meditation and spiritual experiences and wonderful instructions and all this and just plain old fun. They have this wonderfully loving relationship that just gets closer and closer. And his spiritual experiences with Sri Ramakrishna become so profound that at some point he thinks, this is not just an illumined teacher. This is a world teacher of spirituality, along the lines of Jesus or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's what he thinks. He can't hold on to this doubt anymore. This has got to be one of those big personalities, spiritual personalities. And so he's walking with a couple of his friends, who actually turn out to be monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna as well later on. And he tells them, you know, I've had these experiences with Sri Ramakrishna, and I think he's like Buddha or something. And he starts telling them some of these experiences, and he goes into a kind of rapture, and he starts sort of talking to himself, but in front of them, right? And he says, Sri Ramakrishna is actually distributing love. He is bestowing love, devotion, divine knowledge, liberation, and whatever else one may desire on whomsoever he likes. Oh, that wonderful power. And he pauses for a moment and he continues. And he confesses this experience that Sri Ramakrishna had. Just one, so many he's had, but he articulates this one. He says, I was lying on my bed at night with the door of my room bolted from within, when he suddenly attracted me to Dakshineswar. He took me, the one that lives within this body, to Dakshineswar. Giving a great deal of instruction to me and talking on various subjects, he allowed me to return. He can do anything he likes. This Ramakrishna of Dakshineswar can do anything. So what was that? That means you're lying in bed, the door is locked. Your spiritual teacher comes, floats through the door, I don't know, pulls your, subtle body, soul, out of your body, through the door, across town, to the temple, right? That's what he's saying. And then gives you a bunch of instructions and somehow allows you to float back across town, I guess, through the door, back into your body, right? What would you think? This is just another one of these spiritual experiences, right? How many he's had already. He comes to the conclusion that Sri Ramakrishna can do anything. He can do anything he likes. So if someone can do anything he likes, is it unreasonable to think that that person might be an incarnation of God? No, it's not an unreasonable conclusion. So we think that Vivekananda's knowing and doubting thing might finally have been resolved. And what happens? His father dies, completely destroying his life, because his father was living large and providing well for the family. Vivekananda had a nice kind of cushy upbringing. But there was nothing in the bank. It was all debts. And everybody turned on him. All these people turned on Vivekananda. His friends didn't help him. All the creditors called in the debts. Even his family, his extended family, instead of helping, sued him. Sued his family at court, hoping to take away their house. Right? They lose the lawsuit. He keeps the house, but it ruins him. He has no money and the family is starving. Right? So in this situation, disaster has struck. Right? Just when you get it with your teacher, just when you get it with Sri Ramakrishna, all this stuff happens. And now he's forced to walk the streets barefoot, can't afford any shoes, in the hot sun looking for a job. So think about where you were and where you are, right? Where you were having these spiritual ecstasies. You had this wonderful relationship with your teacher. You were learning all these things and hearing all this wisdom, and there were songs and kirtan and just fun with this wonderful, incredible man that eventually you start to think is God. And then, what? I have to go look for a job to, what, like customer service at Amazon or something? I've got to go like keep accounts at some gas station? What am I doing here? I mean, he's 21 at this point, right? How much work is open to him? You know, you're looking for something menial just to keep body and soul together for your mom and your siblings, right? So what would you think, right? What would you think at that time? I mean, when things go south in our lives, right, we may, if we are spiritually mature, be able to say, okay, I got a little off track. You know, God smacked me alongside the head so that I could maybe refocus on my spiritual agenda, which perhaps I'd lost sight of. I think if we're lucky, we might be able to have that kind of sober and poised reaction when life offers some of its challenges to us after the emotions subside. We can at least imagine, even if we can't do it, we can at least conceive of that happening. But think about Vivekananda. His life is dedicated to God already. He has nothing else. He's spending all day, all the time with Sri Ramakrishna. He has no other objective. There is no other life that he has. There's no spiritual life and worldly life. It's just the spiritual life. That's it, right? And it's going so well. Finally, after all this time, he's managed to recognize who Sri Ramakrishna is. And just at that point, when things are really cooking, right? His train is just jamming down the tracks, the whole thing blows up, right? What would you think? Gee, God, did I do something wrong, right? Did you decide you don't like me anymore? That would be my attitude. And there's so many other little dark alleys to go down. Are you punishing me, or you know, I'm a terrible person, or whatever it is however we handle that. He doesn't choose that. He chooses atheism. There is no God. That's his response. There is no God. And one of these days around this time, he is on a job hunt, like I said, barefoot in the hot sun, and he gets exhausted, has to go lie down, and his friend, who happens to be with him, realizes that he's suffering and what he's going through, knows all these things, and he says, well, I'll sing a devotional hymn. That'll pick him up, right? And Vivekananda just bursts forth. He hears a few words of this, and he just bursts forth in fury. Can't stand, doesn't want to listen to this. He says, when I heard that song, I felt as if he was beating me violently on the head. Thinking of the helplessness of my mother and brothers, I was filled with resentment and despair. Be quiet, I told him. Be quiet. That's how they translated it. I don't know what he said, but be quiet is what the book says. That fanciful nonsense is all right for people living in the lap of luxury, people who have no idea what hunger is, people whose nearest and dearest aren't going in rags and starving. No doubt it sounds true and beautiful to them, as it did to me in the old days, but now I've seen what life is really like. That song is just a pack of lies. That's what he says. That song is just a pack of lies. And to me, it's just so amazing that such a great soul like Swami Vivekananda could be hit so hard after all these spiritual experiences. He could be hit so hard by the miseries of life that he could actually come to the conclusion that's just BS, right? It's all BS, right? This, to me, is, I mean, I'm sorry he had to go through it, but it's wonderful because it makes him so real. You know, he's not some yogi in a cave who's sitting there just explaining away good and evil. He is living life and getting hit head on by it and experiencing the full brunt of misery and reacting in a very human way that we can all understand, right? And of course, at this point, things get worse. Once he says this is a pack of lies, there's a rumor starts spreading about him that he's an atheist. And then, once the rumors that he's an atheist start spreading, well, then calumny begins, because people suspect that you adopt the atheistic viewpoint in order to indulge yourself, in order to avoid spiritual discipline, right? That's what they assume. So all this calumny about brothels and drugs and criminal activity, they all show up. You know, he's done nothing. but all this stuff happens, right? So after this, the final straw comes from his mom. He is waking up one day to go on another fruitless job search, and he's chanting the name of the Lord. The mom says, "Why bother, kid? God has done nothing for you. Why are you continuing with this?" Right? And that really rattles him. At this point, he thinks, maybe there is no God. I mean, his mother is so pious, and if she could be driven to this position, he's 21 years old, and he thinks, have I been wrong this whole time? Right? And he really does stop believing in God. And the amazing thing about this is, he continues to pray and meditate and practice spiritual discipline. Talk about holding two contradictory ideas in mind and marching forward, right? This is how to do it, right? There's no God, I'm going to pray and meditate and continue my spiritual practice. I'm going to continue to live a disciplined, ethical life, even though all this stuff is a bunch of baloney, right? So his life tells me that it's okay to have doubts. That's natural and intelligent. You're going to doubt this stuff. You cannot let it paralyze you. We cannot let it stop our spiritual practice. We cannot use it as an excuse for self-indulgence. We cannot use it as an excuse to compromise our values. Continue to march, right? That's what he does, right? Hold these opposing ideas in mind, continue to function. And so what happens? How does he recover? He recalls the lesson of experience. That's what he does. We know and we doubt. We know the past, we doubt the next step forward, we recall the lesson of experience. He says, what was this atheism of mine? Nothing but egotism and pride. The experiences I had had from childhood, and most of all since meeting the Master, rose vividly into my mind in the brightest colors, and I said to myself, God certainly does exist. Otherwise, what is life for? What is it worth? The path to God has to be found no matter how great the struggle. And so that's what we have to do. We have to recall the lesson of experience. He recalls all these experiences he had with Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineswar, right? And you say, okay, well, one of those experiences that Sri Ramakrishna must have had with Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineswar, Sri Ramakrishna says, God alone is the doer, right? We might have heard that. According to Google, that's in the Gospel 23 times. God alone is the doer. Safe to say that Vivekananda heard him say that, okay? God alone is the doer. Well, doesn't that mean, right? Doesn't that mean that God killed his father, that God starved his mother, that God made all his friends turn against him? Doesn't it mean that? Right? Yes, it does. And if you stop there, right, if you stop thinking at that point, what's the solution? The solution is what Job's wife said to him in the Old Testament, curse God and die, right? Job, the similarities between Job and Vivekananda are actually pretty amazing. Just like Vivekananda, Job is a perfect man, actually. According to the Bible, Job is perfect. And he has some friends, so-called, come to visit him, to comfort him, which they don't really. Basically what they do, God smites Job, even though he does not deserve it. God ruins his house, kills his family, covers his body with disease. So Job is completely destroyed. And then his friends come to comfort him, right? And they wind up basically saying, you must have deserved it. Gee, Job, it's too bad. We thought you were this really righteous guy, but it turns out that you actually must be a terrible person because God is unfailingly just. And he has done this to you. Ergo, you must be a real stinker, right? That's their comfort that they give to Job. Now, Job's wife, and then they start to slander his character. Just like Vivekananda's friends, they start to make up things about him. They start to rationalize God's actions, right? And And they make up stories about Job that he must have done this or that, just like Vivekananda's friends. And then the mother, the wife, she doesn't say that. She doesn't do that. She says, curse God and die. What does that mean? She knows his character is blameless. She lives with him, right? She knows he's done no wrong. So she says, give it up. I don't know. You don't seem to have done anything wrong, but apparently God hates you. And so you might as well curse God and die, right? This role is taken by Vivekananda's mother. She says, give it up, kid. What's God ever done for you? Right? They face the same parallel situations. And what does Vivekananda do? Of course, he doesn't curse God and die, right? But we have that choice, in a sense, right? Vivekananda had a clear and legitimate set of circumstances to allow him to say, God's a stinker. He killed my father. He starved my mother. He made my friends betrayed against me. All these things. And he said himself, he was filled with resentment and despair. And that's what that thought does. If we think of all the terrible things that God has done to us in our lives, or other people in their lives, we will, of course, be filled with resentment and despair. And we'll come to the conclusion that God's a stinker. And trusting in God will be utterly impossible. You can't trust in someone that is a stinker. You can't, right? On the other hand, what he does is he recalls the lesson of experience, right? That's what he does. He remembers God's mercies, God's love, and all his experiences in life where God has been gracious, all the privileges God has given him. He recalls these things to mind. And he chooses to focus his attention there, right? And when we choose to focus our attention there, instead of resentment and despair, we get gratitude, joy, hope, faith, trust. All these things come naturally that way, right? And you might wonder, why doesn't that, it seems like all these memories of God's injustices, the things that bring thoughts of resentment and despair, they seem to come completely naturally to me. And yet, all God's mercies and God's graces, I don't think about those so much. I don't think about all the lucky breaks I've had. I don't think about how many times I've been let off the hook. Right? I don't really do that naturally. Naturally, what I think about is the places, the times in my life where it seemed like God let me down. And what does that mean? It means I had a real strong opinion about how a situation should have turned out and it didn't turn out that way. Right? That's what that means. And so we have this problem where resentment and despair seem to be natural. Gratitude and joy seem to be effort. Right? This, according to Vedanta, is the situation that we suffer because of the impure mind. This is what the impure mind does. Why does it do it? Because it perpetuates a narrative of victimhood, in this case victimhood, to sustain the ego. Right? That's what the impure mind does. And it doesn't matter what the narrative is. It could be a narrative of victimhood. It could be self-aggrandizement. It could be self-hatred. It makes no difference. Any kind of narrative that the impure mind comes up with that will grab the intelligent will and focus it on that narrative will sustain the ego. Right? And so we practice yoga to change the narrative, right? That's what we do. We want to change the narrative to something constructive. We practice yoga to purify the mind, force thoughts of love, gratitude, and God's mercies and graces into our mind, right? Because when you force those thoughts in, however difficult it may be, eventually they come back out. They get burped up, just like every other thought. We think something, we see a movie, the next day we burp up the movie, right? And the same thing with this, right? Force feed the mind with thoughts of love and compassion and sympathy and gratitude. Change the narrative, right? It's work, right? Recalling God's mercies, recalling the lesson of experience is work. For now we have both. For now we have knowing and doubting. We have our own past. I think every one of us in here today has ample reason to call God a stinker. Legitimate reason. And I think every one of us here today also has ample reason to recall God's mercies and graces in our lives. I think we all have this choice. And so for now, we have to face these opposing ideas, this knowing and doubting. We know God's graces and mercies. We doubt his goodwill in the next venture, whatever it is, right? For now, we do what Vivekananda did. We march with these contrary ideas in our minds. We march forward as best we can. The good news is there comes a day when we don't have to march. The march does not last forever. All right, and I'm going to close with a beautiful poem that Swami Vivekananda gave out in Thousand Island Park in New York, in this country. It's about not Persian, Iraqi. She's an Iraqi mystic. Her name is Rabia. She lived in Baghdad in 700 or 800 AD. She was a Muslim. And there's amazing stories about Rabia if you want to look her up on the internet. She's got a bunch of very interesting things. But anyway, at this time, she's sick in bed, right? And in this story, this is an instance of God's punishment. She's being punished by God. That's the idea, right? Whether we think when we get sick we're being punished by God is another question. But that's the idea, okay? So she is visited by two of her friends who are going to tell her, or they're going to comfort her, right? And what they wind up kind of saying in between the lines is, God has given you this sickness, and you should accept, your attitude might not be that great about this, and so you should accept this situation that God has put on you, right? That's more or less their position. I don't know why we do this. As human beings, it's when someone else experiences, they crash, something bad happens to them, it's not hard to see how they had it coming a lot of the time, We have that, well, they kind of had it coming. And then we think, I'm going to go comfort that person, right? How are you going to comfort this person when they had it coming? I mean, you may not say it, right? But if down there somewhere you're thinking you had it coming, how much comfort can you really give, right? Anyway, so these people come to Rabia. And this poem, Swami Vivekananda gives beautifully. He says, Rabia, sick upon her bed, by two saints was visited, Holy Malik, Hassan wise, men of mark and Muslim eyes. Hassan said, he whose prayer is pure will God's chastisements endure. Right? So in other words, you're sick. This is God chastising you. If you have a good attitude, you're going to endure this, right? The next saint is going to raise the bar a little bit. Malik, from a deeper sense, uttered his experience. He who loves his master's choice will in chastisement rejoice. So God's done this to you, and if you really were a devotee, you'd be just happy that you're lying in bed sick and miserable. Dance in the harness, right? That's his position. And she just clocks them all. It's great, she says. Rabia saw some selfish will in their maxims lingering still, and replied, O men of grace, he who sees his master's face will not in his prayers recall that he has been chastised at all. Isn't that beautiful? That is the end of the march. That is when the march ends. And according to Vedanta, we will all reach that. May the good Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. May good betide all. May happiness come to all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified with the armor of love, goodwill, joy, and understanding. Om, peace, peace, peace.
sweet refuge you are to me in this ever-changing life. Sweet refuge on every sea, through the struggle and the strife. Joys, they come and go like waves, they ebb and flow. Like sorrows come and go, the sun rises with the dawn. Sweet refuge when all are gone and your face is all I see. Sweet refuge in all my songs, words and tunes you give to me. And when questions rise and answers are not found, I look within your eyes and feel your grace abound. Sweet refuge in life and death, two sides of the same coin. Sweet refuge in every breath, my heart to you belongs. Wherever I may go in this world, my eyes do see. May I always know you're always here with me. Sweet refuge, you filled my heart with love that overflows. Sweet refuge, your faces, your names resound above, below. Guide my every step in beauty and in peace. May I ever see your face in peace, sweet refuge, precious refuge, sweetest refuge, you are to me.
So there's a few announcements before we are dismissed. Next Sunday, we're going to have Sri Ramakrishna and the Growth Mindset. This is from Swami Vivekananda, whom I've known for many, many years. And he's been in India now for, gosh, it's been a while, at least like 6 or 7 or 8 years or something. He was there when I was there, 2012, and then I think he left and came back. Anyway, he's been away. He's born in this country, but he's been away for a long time, and he's making the rounds when he comes back to the United States, and I'm looking forward to seeing him again. Anyway, that would be one to, you get to meet a new Swami, and he'll probably wind up coming back here someday. I don't think he's going to stay in India forever, but we'll see. Who knows? And then on Wednesdays, our Krishna Prana Mataji leads a class at 5 p.m. on Swami Arupeshananda. And she talks about this book, How a Shepherd Boy Became a Saint. And I don't know if you're doing it front to back or how that's going, but there's some amazing stuff in that book. There's some great material in there. And then, other than that, what do we have? Saturdays, 5 p.m. a Bhagavad Gita class, and then a Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class, 9 a.m. No, I've got this wrong. The other Saturdays. Okay, so let's do this right, just to do it right. Saturday the 18th, we have a Bhagavad Gita class, Swami Sarvadevananda, 5 p.m. The rest of the Saturdays, we have a class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Did I get that right? Okay, very good. Okay, so thank you all very much for coming. I'll greet you at the door, and then I'll come back in here if anybody wants to chat. Okay, nice seeing you all. Well, do you have any questions you want to ask? Yes, you do. Okay, go ahead.
Would you please repeat that? Would you please repeat the last thing you said about, you know what I'm talking about, the quote about...
Rabia, sick in bed, by two saints was visited. You want to hear that again?
Yes,
Sure,
I do.
okay. I don't think I have it memorized, although I could come close, but we'll just read it. Yeah, it's a beautiful poem, and I've never seen it anywhere else. As far as I know, Vivekananda composed that extempore when he was in Thousand Island Park.
It was amazing.
Yeah, it's a great poem. It's really something. Rabia, sick upon her bed, by two saints was visited. Holy Malik, Hassan wise, men of mark in Muslim eyes. Hassan said, he whose prayer is pure will God's chastisements endure. Malik, from a deeper sense, uttered his experience. He who loves his master's choice will in chastisement rejoice. That seems like a tough one. But then she just hits it out of the park, right? She says, Rabia saw some selfish will in their maxims lingering still, and replied, O men of grace, he who sees his master's face will not in his prayers recall that he has been chastised at all. Isn't that wonderful? Really something, yeah. And as far as I know, he just did that off the cuff. He just translated it from Persian off the cuff. And his brilliant mind he had, you know. Yeah.
18 qualities.
18 qualities? Oh, right. That's good. Yeah, you remember that one. Yeah. Yeah, the 18 qualities that would move the world, I think. Sri Ramakrishna said he had. Yeah. I saw his name in the New York Times a few days ago. Swami Vivekananda, yeah. Anything else? I was thinking, does anyone else have a question? You usually do. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I see spiritualism as death and rebirth, and nothing in between.
Okay.
So if I have any reason to have faith, what do I need the faith for? Because I want something. If I give up what I want, I don't need the faith. The pain's gone. And anything...
That's a big if.
No.
It's a big if I give up what I want. That's not so
Pardon me?
easy to do. If I give up what I want, it's not so easy to do. Yes, that solves everything.
Well,
That solves
yes.
every problem. But
Right.
how many people can do that?
That's the death and rebirth. That's the spiritual path.
Yeah, sure.
Everything else is kind of a Protestant way of going about it, or psychology, or if I just talk myself into everything's been okay before, you've always been taken care of, have faith that it's like talk therapy. To me, faith is part of that. And if you just, you eliminate whatever the problem is by not wanting it, then all the problems go away.
Yeah, agreed.
There you go. You don't need faith after all. It's what
Yeah, if you can give up all your desires, you don't need anything.
If
If you can give up all your desires, the game is over. That's it. Nothing else.
They're painful That's what the nature
Yeah,
of
yeah,
them.
it makes
are painful.
sense. No, it
Yeah.
makes sense. I agree with you. Try and do it. I'm still working on it.
And-
That's what Krishna says in the Gita. Renounce all your desires forever, he says, point blank. That's it. Renounce all your desires forever. Well, okay. Yes, that would, as Buddha says, noble truth number 2, right? The cause of pain is desire. Right? Noble truth number 1, right? Life is pain. First you have to accept that, which if you can't, then you're probably not going to be a Buddhist. But if you can, number 2 is obvious. The cause of pain is desire. Why? Because desire is a lack, right? It is a lack, and it is a need. It is an imperfection, right? To have all your desires fulfilled, what would that mean if you had all your desires fulfilled?
I wouldn't want that.
It means you would have no desire. It means you would have no desire. And that is, give up all your desires forever. It means perfect fulfillment. Right? So which one of us is perfectly fulfilled here?
It's as it comes up.
So this is not so easy to do, is my point, right? It's not so easy. Yes, as it comes up, but that's the path, right? That's the path. But once you actually have realized what he's talking about, you have realized a state of consciousness that is so far above this transactional reality that there is nothing here that can pull or push you. It is, you're not living this kind of transactional, I'll give this one up, I'll give that one up next week, that kind of thing. You have found something so much better. You have found a state of mind so much higher than where we live, that all that this world has to offer, it's just nickels. You've won the lottery.
It's true.
That's what we're looking. That is the state of nirvana. That is no desire. That is perfect fulfillment. Perfect fulfillment, right? You can't get better than perfect fulfillment. But I agree with you. Just give up your desires. That's it. Problem solved.
It's the death and rebirth, and then you're transformed. It's like that's the whole thing. That's spirituality. That's the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the Holy Spirit? The fight between positive, negative, and the Shiva. It's the whole
Positive, negative, and the Shiva? What is that?
Positive, negative, and then the Holy Spirit. It's transformed. And
Okay.
that's spirituality to me.
Okay, so you fight off the desire and then you go
When
beyond it.
there's a battle, you want something. There's a desire, and then it's transformed. It's death. Because you give it up, it dies, and then out of giving it up, something different happens.
Right, we talked a little bit about that today. That's this promotion. Is it in my best spiritual interest or not? Right? Hard to say. Do you have to give this one up, or do you actually have to see it through? Right? Some of these desires we can't just give up. Some of these desires we actually have to fulfill. But what I was suggesting today is that in order to do this in a constructive manner, for most people, to just cut off all desires immediately is not realistic. Some of them we're just going to have to go through. We're going to have certain experiences. That's why we're here. And so in order to go through those experiences in a way where we can grow in trust towards God, where we can handle our own misfortune without too much anxiety and worry, what Sri Ramakrishna suggested today through that parable with Adhar was to make God the highest objective, the final objective. All other material, worldly objectives, desires that we have, we subordinate to that spiritual goal, right? We keep that spiritual goal. It may be far off. I may want to do a bunch of little things before that. I want to get this job. I want to buy this house, whatever it is I want to do. But the final goal is God. Make God the final goal, right? And what we want to do is be able to soberly accept rejection, because when it happens, and I realize this is difficult. I mean, it's not as difficult as being in Ukraine or whatever, but it's still difficult. Soberly accept rejection because we recall that God is the final goal, and perhaps this proximate goal was not in my best spiritual interest. Perhaps this one I need to just cut off. Even when I get it, even when I get the promotion, or I meet the man or woman or whatever of my dreams, whatever it is that we're looking for, still keep it in view. This is not the final goal. This is not it, right? I'm moving forward past one experience and another, one desire and another, with my ultimate goal being God. Right? That is the final goal. So Sri Ramakrishna's teaching is to make God the highest goal. He doesn't say to Adhar, for what you're saying traditionally is true for a monk like me, and I haven't done it, but I'm supposed to, just cut off all your desires forever. Sannyasi, renounce. That's it. Over, right? But I haven't been able to do that. I don't really know anybody else who's been able to do that. And what Sri Ramakrishna is suggesting is very practical to me, right? Which is to subordinate as best you can your material objective to your spiritual objective, right? That is the sort of path of growth, right? So in success and in failure, we keep this in view. What is my ultimate goal, right? Anybody else? Yeah.
Namaskar, Maharaj.
Namaskar.
I often hear from the lecture here and also from my parents back in India that if you really want to know Satchidananda, a supreme Brahman, then you must have a blessing from Supreme Mother, because she is the ultimate who can break all association from samsara or maya. And once that disappear, then path become easier. So if you could kindly enlighten me in that thought, that would be great.
So you're saying that in order to get rid of desire, like we were talking about, you need the Divine Mother's help. Is that basically your... And how do you get it? How do you propitiate the Divine Mother? That is your question, right? Well, I'm still working on that myself. But yeah, that view that you just put out is basically what's given in the Chandi, where a king loses his kingdom and he can't give up his attachment to the kingdom. He still wants his kingdom. So he's in this position where he knows that he can't have it and he doesn't want to want it, but he can't get rid of the desire. And he goes to a sage in the forest and he says, what's the deal? You know I've lost the kingdom. I know I can't get it back, and yet I can't get it out of my head. I want my horse, I want my retinue, I want my treasury, I want all my stuff back. I want my kingdom back, right? Why do I have this desire? An intelligent king who can think this way, right? I mean, it says a lot for this king. But anyway, he realizes that the problem is not misfortune, right? The problem is his desire. He realizes that. And so he comes to the sage and asks the sage, why am I stuck with this desire? Why do I want this thing that I know I can't have? It's making me miserable. And the sage says, point blank, blames the whole thing on God. He says, you are being deluded by the Divine Mother. That's what he says. And he goes through a whole story of how the Divine Mother deludes and then liberates. That's what she does. He suggests how to propitiate her, how to get her on your side so that she will release you from desire, release you from your worldly bondage. The sage in the Chandi suggests that you repeat the Chandi, which is a whole bunch of verses, and it's a ritualistic worship and all that. There are so many methods. That is one that he espouses. And it's actually particularly emphasized in our order, chanting the Chandi, especially considered to be auspicious on Tuesdays and Saturdays. But that is a formal worship. What Sri Ramakrishna, and really I think every legitimate spiritual teacher would tell you, that what you really need is sincerity and earnestness. That is what we really need. Again and again, we read in the gospel, God, those who want God get God. Those who want to be free get free. If we really, really want it, we will get it. Just like Jesus says, right? Knock and it shall be opened. Seek and ye shall find. Ask and it shall be given to you, right? All these things he says. Same idea. This wanting God sounds simple. It's not so easy. Like so much in religion, it is simple and not easy. And I remember there was a lecture, it was on the Narada Bhakti Sutras by Swami Arupeshananda, who started this place. And it was in Hollywood, I think. It doesn't matter. And somebody raised their hand after the class and said, Swami, I heard that if you can weep for God for 24 hours, then you get a vision of him. And Swami said, yeah, 24 hours. He said, I think you could probably do it in 12. And the guy said, well, why should that be so hard? And Swami laughed and said, ha ha ha, go home and try it. Wanting God is not so easy. Wanting sincerely to escape from samsara, this world, its bondage, its trappings, its horrors, its joys, all these things, it sounds good, but deep down we have these habits of thinking, habits of attachments. We're actually, things that we think we want to let go of, we're actually not quite ready to let go of at some deeper level a lot of the time. That's why we practice meditation and yoga, right? So that we can purify samskaras, these tendencies, these impressions in our mind. And when the samskaras are purified, our attachments are loosened. And this is why we practice yoga, meditation, service, love, scriptural study, all these things, so that we can purify the mind. The purified mind is the sincere mind. The sincere mind is answered, right? When you are sincerely asked, you get answered. In fact, that was Nisargadatta said, there's no such thing as a sincere spiritual aspirant. Why? Because if you're sincere, you're not an aspirant anymore. Right? If you're perfectly sincere, it's over. So there is no such thing as a sincere spiritual aspirant. So it's degrees, we're all shades of gray here, right? And we're working for that. But once you have that sincerity, it happens. You propitiate the Divine Mother, you cut your bondage, however you want to phrase it. And that's why we practice these yogas, is to do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's a paradox, right? It's a simple
Microphone,
paradox.
yeah.
It is a simple paradox. Just like from the childhood, we have learned judo.
Judo, you said. Judo.
Zero.
Oh, zero.
Zero, yeah.
Okay. In judo, all right.
But we do not know what is zero.
Zero.
If we think about zero, zero is nothing. Can we think about nothing? No.
Well, I remember many years ago, I was at a Buddhist temple, and the monks were having us have a group meditation. And we sat and we took some deep breaths and did this, and they told us this or that, sit this way, focus your mind here, and this and that. And then he said, okay, now empty your minds. And I kind of, like that's going to happen. But that is something that people try and just do. They try and just empty the mind. Swami Arupeshananda, I don't know if you've heard of him, he's a disciple of Maharaj. He's a very senior Swami, great illumined soul in our order, passed away many years ago. He used to say that if you sit and meditate and try and empty your mind, what you're going to wind up doing is putting yourself to sleep. That's what he said. You're going to wind up going to sleep. So what we do first, most of the time, not everyone, I actually know one monk I know in particular who wasn't given this instruction, but almost everyone I know is given an ishta, a personal manifestation of God, Jesus, Buddha, Ramakrishna, something like that, to focus the mind on. This in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is called, I don't remember the Sanskrit, you bring all the thought waves to one giant thought wave, right? One giant thought wave in the mind. This giant thought wave is a focus on a personal ishta, a personal God, Jesus, Buddha, whatever. So you gather the mind with all, and you sit, and those of you who try to meditate, you sit and you try and gather the mind, you realize it is scattered, right? And you try and gather it on, and focus it on Jesus or whatever, you find it very challenging. But once you've gathered the entire mind, so that all the thought waves in the mind add up to one giant thought wave, one giant thought wave, and that is all going towards this ishta that you've chosen, Krishna or whatever. The next step after that leads you to a certain kind of samadhi called savakalpa samadhi, right? A certain kind of state of yoga that's said to be at the sixth chakra. I'm sorry, 6 chakras here. That leads you to that state. And then after you've managed to do that, then the job is to eliminate that last wave. To complete what the mind is called seedless at that point, right? Because after you've had this experience of savakalpa samadhi in the 6th chakra, there are still apparently little seeds of desire in your mind. But if you want to completely burn your mind perfectly pure, then what you have to do is eliminate that last wave, that last personal ideal that you have. And Sri Ramakrishna did this. There's an amazing story in his life where he meets, he meets a teacher of non-dualism, one of these just empty your mind people. And what happens is he keeps trying to empty his mind, and the Divine Mother, who he's realized, keeps showing up, right? And keeps getting in the way. And finally he says that regarding knowledge, wisdom, jnana, whatever you want to call it, as a sword, right? He thought of knowledge as a sword. And he cut the form of the Divine Mother in two with the sword of knowledge and went to the formless beyond seventh chakra, had the highest samadhi, and was in that state for a few days. So that's a lofty, that is a lofty attainment. But for people like us, it is, at least what is taught in our tradition is that it is better to start with a form. Like I said, I know at least one monk who was given a formless meditation. This is really, you need a guru for this, who can see your spiritual path, see your spiritual tendencies, your history. There are people that can do this. I'm not one of them, but anyway, one of those people who can do that will give you the appropriate meditation. A form is not for everyone. And then which form, right? You start meditating on Krishna, and then a few months later you think, I kind of like Buddha, or whatever, right? You pick your own thing, and then it works for a while. That's the trap. You pick your own thing, it works for a few months. I've seen this happen. It works for a few months, and then you think, I guess it's not working anymore. You hit the wall. You hit the wall, and then you think, okay, well, I must have picked the wrong thing. I'll go look in some other book and find some other meditation and try that. But if you have a teacher that you have faith in, someone who has given you instruction that you believe, and hopefully you're right, knows your spiritual malady and has given you the correct diagnosis, then you will stick with that through the inevitable obstacles and dry spells that will show up. Because we all get those. Everybody gets those. It doesn't matter if you pick Krishna or Buddha, it makes no difference. You're going to have a dry spell. You're going to have ups and downs. And in those downs, just like we said today, right? You know when you doubt. When you're in the down, you doubt. And then at that point, you have to say, the lesson of experience. I know this worked, right? I will continue to march forward. I will not allow this doubt to paralyze me. I will not allow this doubt to give me an excuse to compromise my principles. Vivekananda, he's an atheist and he keeps meditating and praying, right? There's nothing to this, he says, and he also says that even if there is a God, it makes no difference because praying to him achieves nothing, right? Because he'd done it himself and he saw that it did nothing for him. Still he prays, still he meditates, still he upholds his ethical standards, right? So, for this kinds of meditation technique, those specific things, you really need a teacher so that you will push through those obstacles, right? You will have the faith to push through the dry spells because we all get them. So I answered a lot more than your question, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Is that it? Okay, I thought everybody's had something? All right. Let's have a little guided meditation before we go. I thought that might be a nice idea, okay? All right, so try and sit with your shoulders square and your chin up, your spine straight. It doesn't matter if you're sitting cross-legged or not. But we find that when we meditate, if our posture, if our shoulders sag and our chin droops, we will find that our thoughts also sag and droop. And the reverse is true. That when the thoughts sag and droop, the shoulders and the chin also naturally follow. And so it is wise to try and keep a good posture just for that purpose, to keep the thoughts high. Okay, so now let us try and listen to the beating of our own heart, or at least feel it. Close to that heart, but nearer to the center of the chest, is the heart chakra. It is deep within the body. Try and feel this heart chakra, the spiritual heart, near the physical heart, but deeper inside. This heart chakra is a source of strength, a source of joy, purity, compassion, and peace. It is a living light, a conscious light inside our body. Now we imagine this light filling our body, expanding from the center, so that our whole body is filled with this light of love, this light of joy, light of compassion, light of peace. And this conscious living light, we imagine, shines through the body, through every pore of our skin. The whole body is shining with love, shining with joy, shining with sympathy, strength. And now, we send this light out in all directions to all beings in the hopes that we can spread these divine feelings to all. So we send thoughts of love, hope, sympathy, and strength to the north. We send them to the south. Love, compassion, joy, and peace to the east, to the west, and above, and below. Light, living, loving, conscious, divine light shines through our bodies in all directions, bestowing peace, blessings on all. May good betide all. May happiness come to all. May all see the face of truth. And be fortified with the armor of love. Goodwill, joy, and understanding. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us. Peace be unto all. And now we bring this light back inside our bodies. And we carry this light in our hearts. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Okay, you can open your eyes. And thank you all for coming. And I hope we can carry our lights out there into the world and maintain this, maintain our practice and our efforts. All right. I don't think we have any more questions. No? Okay.